So I can remember as a kid, teenager, and sometimes in college and beyond, you one of the main magazines that you crave, I guess you could say, Matt, coming out of the spring was getting a hold of Athlon or Lindy's or whoever. Well, Athlon's come out with their quote championship prediction. Now I know when the two of you were growing up, you checked TikTok for all of your predictions, but I want to go through this and I want to have a legitimate discussion about where we're really at here with what Athlon's got because and I'm not being sarcastic here. I mean, Athlon for a long time was sort of the voice or the barometer of what things would be. Athlon would come out in the fall, in the early summer. You'd vote at media days, but most people had already read Athlon, Matt, to take it from there. And this is in the 2000s when we used to use wooden boats to get around. So Athlon's predictions are as follows: the top six in the league. They're going to go LSU at 6, Missouri at 5, Alabama at 4, Ole Miss at 3, Texas at 2, and Georgia at 1. And they were saying that Georgia will beat Texas in the SEC championship game in Atlanta.
Yeah, I forgot all about Ole Miss when we were talking about something similar in another video. That's another really good SEC program that it feels like they know what they're doing. And I feel like a lot of programs know what they're doing, or at least have a coach that has the mindset of, hey, this is how it's supposed to look like. This is how we get better. And they're all trying to build their own foundation. We talked about what Kirby Smart did 8 years ago coming in. He laid out his plan and he's executing it. And a lot of coaches are trying to do the same. But that's not a bad list. I do think Tennessee could be a good team. Now, I'm not saying they're going to necessarily be in the 12-team playoff because there's a lot of good teams, I think, right? But I think they're heading in the right direction. But, Ole Miss is a team that is maybe hyped up a little too much. But, I mean, on paper, they've got a lot of talent, Ryan, and they brought in a lot of guys. They've got a returning quarterback. They've got a head coach, offensive-minded, who knows what he's doing. They got bigger on both the offensive line and defensive line, which is exactly what they needed to do, is add, more muscle and more mass there, more size. And they did that. And I think Garrett Nussmeier down in LSU could have a better season than people think. That dude can sling it. We saw a little bit of that in that SEC championship game 2 years ago. He's an older guy now, and I think he could really surprise a lot of people. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on Brian Kelly, who came in to take them to a level where they're competing for championships, and they're not doing that just yet. Maybe this is the year they take a step forward. So, and we know Missouri's tough. That's not the Missouri team from 4, 5, 6 years ago. They know how to play, especially defensively, and they're bringing in a lot of talent too. They're recruiting really well. I don't think they're going anywhere necessarily, but they're not on the same level as Alabama and Georgia and Texas. But one of those teams might be at the end of the season. I don't know, but I think it's a very talented and deep SEC this year. I think there are a lot of good teams, Ryan.
I haven't seen a prediction that really is different than Georgia over Texas or Georgia versus Texas in the SEC championship. Everybody that's kind of released that is saying the same thing.
Who would it be, Ryan? Who would it be if it's not Texas and Georgia? Like, you can take one or both out. Who would you have in the SEC championship game?
Alabama, but then I kind of am starting to clump Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss into a very similar category in my head. I think it's more of a Georgia, and then I don't think there's that much separation between Texas and Alabama and Ole Miss. More so Texas over them. I think they lost the majority of their offensive production. They lost a lot of their defense production, and that's all being replaced through the transfer portal. Quinn Ewers is your big constant. But schedule-wise, I mean, Missouri's biggest test is Alabama. I look at the rest of their games, and I think W for Missouri, even with at Texas A&M. So, and 11-1 is going to get you in the SEC championship because there's not going to be 3 or 4 11-1 teams. They're going to eat each other up. So I look at Missouri as a team that has a real chance of making it, whether they are actually as good as Ole Miss or Alabama. But they could lose to just Alabama and make the SEC championship pretty easily. But I just don't think that this take where it's Georgia and Texas versus everybody else. I don't know. I think it's more of it's Georgia's clearly better, and then there's a few teams that have a really good chance.
But Matt, are they going to survive this schedule, Georgia? I mean, you're going on the road to 3 top 10 teams.
I I think I'm expecting one loss in that regular season just because it's so hard to bring it every single weekend. I'm going to take Quinn Ewers' words. I mean, Georgia's the team that everyone has circled, whether you want to believe it or not. I'm sure Alabama has Auburn circled always, but they've got that Georgia game circled as well. Texas, they can't wait for Georgia to come to town. That's the game that is in the back of their minds. Of course, Oklahoma's big, A&M's big, but when Georgia comes to town, that is a big, big deal. Ole Miss, after what they did last year in Athens, they would like to shock the world and beat Georgia. Kentucky always finds a way to play tough in Lexington when the Dogs come to town. So it's going to be really tough. And I don't know if anyone's expecting Georgia to run the table in the regular season this year of all years, but I could definitely see them losing one game. I don't know about two, especially if it's early in the season. That's when they know, okay, if we lose in Tuscaloosa, I don't think it's going to happen. But for some reason, then that game in Texas and in Oxford, even more important because you don't want to lose two games. So if there's a game to lose, yeah, it's probably in Oxford or in Austin, depending on how the season is going up to that point.
So, hey, listen, I think Ryan's actually correct. Missouri's not going to get challenged their first four games. They play Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt. They play all four of those games at home. And then they go to College Station, which I think is like the teetering spot. I think if they win that game, they might be in Atlanta, to be honest with you. So then they go to UMass, which is like, I feel like we have to have a long discussion about that some other time. That makes no sense in any way. That makes no sense. I mean, I don't know who owes favors up there, but and then they host Auburn. They go to Alabama. So I think if they come out of that 4-game stretch with one loss and they're looking at 7-1, I mean, they close with Oklahoma at home, at Carolina, at State, and Arkansas at home. They should win all those games. I don't know what their over/under is. I'm gonna throw it to Ryan, but because I'm gonna look it up. I bet it's 9.5 or 10.5. That is an extremely manageable schedule. I mean, Georgia. When you look at Alabama's schedule, just in the league, they play Georgia at home. They got to go to Tennessee. They host Missouri. They got to go to LSU. They got to go to Oklahoma. And, of course, they play Auburn at home, Ryan. I mean, like, one of those is a lot more difficult than the other.
Yeah, theirs is at 9.5. But I think that the only ones that are at 10.5 is Georgia and Texas.
Texas in the league, yes.
But maybe Ole Miss. But that's
Go ahead.
You look at those three schedules. I'm looking at all three of them right now with Alabama, Ole Miss, and Missouri, and you really only look at one and kind of mark it as a loss in your head, and you think the rest of them should be wins.
They might not lose in Tuscaloosa, though, man. I mean, I'm talking about Missouri. I'm just saying, what is their history? Like, they don't. There's no. They don't have the players Georgia does. Missouri, I think that's relatively clear, right? I mean, Luther Burden's a star. The quarterback is really good. Cook. They're just like a really good team. They're not as good as Alabama is, but I'm not saying they can't win that game. I mean, we're gonna have to see with Alabama, Ryan. We're just gonna have to see.
We have to see it. I'm in the boat that Alabama's not gonna drop off as far as the majority thinks, just because I think their roster is largely the same when you look at it, and if I'm also a believer that if Kalen DeBoer and Jalen Milroe is a good pairing, that could be more dangerous than maybe we're giving it credit for. But Texas for their first rodeo, it's tough because they've got to go to Michigan at the beginning. That's not going to affect. Is that going to affect is it just conference record that affects this?
My understanding is it's just conference.
So then that doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
So. I mean, Texas has got it the easiest when all you have to deal with is Georgia. Their second toughest game is at A&M, or is it against Oklahoma? Because I don't think either of those teams are that great this year.
Rivalry game, I could see them losing one of those two. It is a rivalry game, but talent-wise, I think they should win those games. But they're going to have to bring it, and they're going to have to step up and bring their A game week in and week out. And it's not going to be easy to do. But if you're Missouri and you're playing Alabama, what do you have to lose? I mean, absolutely. They can go in there and, throw some risk everything they have, the whole playbook, to try to beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa. And if they're going to do it, this is probably the year that they need to do it. So again, what do you have to lose? Give it everything you have. I could totally see them going in there and knocking off Alabama, depending on, I don't know where Alabama plays them, if or what their record could be going into that game, who they played the week before. I think a lot of that matters too. But I think Missouri could ruin some seasons this year if they are as good as people think that they could be.
So just to put a button on this, the Missouri game is at Tuscaloosa, and it's the week after Tennessee, Alabama in Knoxville. So Mizzou has played Auburn the week before. Both teams have bye weeks the week later. To some degree, it is a sandwich game for Bama because they go Tennessee, Missouri off, and then LSU. But I don't think Alabama will have more than one loss. They could be undefeated at that point. They're going to be an underdog to Georgia. They're going to be an underdog to LSU, or they currently are. I'm not sure they're going to be a dog to anybody else. I don't think they lose to Wisconsin. I think I just said that. I was thinking it. I know that. I don't think they will. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But they've got, Vandy and Carolina. They're not going to lose those games, I don't think. That would be shocking. And then, to go to Oklahoma and close with Oklahoma and Auburn is challenging. But everybody's got a little bit of something in all these schedules. I mean, Florida looks like they might not win one of their last 6 games. So it's just tough out there. I did want to say all that about Athlon. I think the Athlon it's been such a good publication to look and flip through all the time. But they go Georgia 1, Texas 2, Ole Miss 3, Bama 4, which will surely trigger people, Missouri 5, and then LSU 6. Tell us what you think down below. Thanks for watching.